Hi, it's Calvin Niles, the mindful storyteller, and I am delighted to share with you stories of awakening. Each week, I'm going to be talking to people from around the world of various backgrounds and experiences. People I love, I know, and people I admire, but also those who are completely new to me. One thing all my guests will have in common is that they have been through a journey of awakening. By awakening, I mean a call to higher consciousness and deeper self-awareness beyond material reality. These stories will be real, challenging, funny, stimulating, and insightful. We're going to take our good time with these conversations. So listen from your comfy chair with your favorite drink, or on your weekend stroll, your morning routine, or whatever makes you happy. Stories of Awakening with me, Calvin Niles, and I look forward to you tuning in. I am so happy to have a new friend of mine, Angie. Angie was introduced to me by, I think, one of my previous guests, Alex Bannar. So Angie Latham is a published photographer, artist, and a sound healer, but more importantly, what we're interested in is learning all about your story of awakening, Angie, your call to higher consciousness. I'm just so happy to have you here. As usual, I've got a fresh cup of coffee. Can you see the steam coming off of this? I don't know if you can tell. You can't see it in the camera.
I'm much more holistic with my water.
Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah, where did it all begin for you?
Oh wow. It's funny because I was thinking about, you know, awakening and that kind of phrase of awakening. And actually I see it as I see it differently. I see it as reawakening because I feel that we are awake. We come into this world as a baby, pure soul essence, and we depending on our family circumstances, we kind of hold on to that through, for 2 3 years, maybe even longer if we're lucky, but then we kind of fall asleep or in some cases are encouraged to go to sleep, put to sleep maybe. And then I think most of us spend the rest of our lives trying to remember and reconnect to who we truly are, and find our way back to our soul and spirit and God's source energy. So I think it's kind of like I can remember always being awake when I was younger, and my earliest memories are just sitting in the garden and just noticing the energy of everything, the energy of the flowers, the energy of the plants, that everything seemed completely alive to me, in a kind of a 3D way, um, and the stars and everything. I just felt part of everything. Um, and some of my earliest memories as well was being, well, I must have been like probably under 3 because I can remember being in a cot, so there's bars around me, but with beings looking over me. And really I don't know whether they were family or past family, or whether they were angelics. I think probably a bit of both, but there was always this feeling of, there was more around me than what I could physically see. um, and then I suppose my family was Christian, so then I started going to church, and I think that's probably where the problem started in that going to sleep, because then you were kind of like taught that God is somewhere up here and something special and very male energetically, and we're down here, sinners in the bottom of the barrel, and there's this huge kind of gap, there's this huge separation, and to have any connection with God's source energy, we have to go through a third person, like a priest or a bishop or whatever. And that's where it started getting all a bit sort of uncomfortable for me, I suppose. I had some beautiful experiences in church. I was in the choir for a bit, and I used to love evensong because there was hardly anybody there. and I just used to sit and daydream and look at the stained glasses. And even then, I was very attracted to the angels rather than the Jesus figures, you know. And but I found that the feeling, the energetic connection that I had of being in the church wasn't really reflected in what I was hearing in the sermons and what the vicar was saying. I found it all a bit too judgmental, and I don't know, just a lot of it just didn't ring true, even back then, even as a girl. So um,
So this was like as a young child,
mm,
even what, smaller than 10?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I was in the choir between about 8, 9 till about sort of 12, 13.
Yeah.
Um, and then I moved away from church through different circumstances, really, moving house and things like that. But I went when I was a teenager. I suppose my intuition really started to kick in. So I started having prophetic dreams. I started to have a lot of intuitive feelings about things, um, but a lot of it scared me because, of course, I was already starting to be influenced by the education system and media, so you know, and things like horror films, you know, Ouija boards and poltergeists and stuff like that. Um so I started to be afraid of, you know, my natural ability to read energy, pick up, connect with spirit. um and as a teenager in the 80s, you know, there was no internet, of course. So you know, I'm so jealous of teenagers now that can just go on Facebook and find a group, you know, spiritual connections or whatever, to, you know, where you can find information and you can really do your own research. But I mean, back then in the 80s, as a kind of like, you know, teenager was 14, 15, 16, I just felt completely disconnected, completely bereft. I knew that I wasn't normal. I knew I didn't really fit in and that I felt different, but I didn't understand how that was different and why I felt different and who to ask about being different. So when my
Yeah.
mum when my mum brought me back a leaflet from the local church. She'd been on a country walk, and it was a leaflet about sort of, you know, be careful about your teenagers getting into the occult, and you know, and how it's the devil's work and all that kind of thing. And I was like, oh my god, you know, I'm I'm
You
getting
felt
into
you
the
felt
dark.
guilty in a way.
Yeah, I just well, it
Mm.
freaked me out. I was completely scared. I thought, oh my god, maybe I am just getting drawn into, you know, these dark forces of the occult. And I remember sort of like getting some holy water. Can't remember where I got it from, and sprinkling it around my bedroom at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then I really kind of pulled away from everything and I shut down my intuition. I just, you know, it was scaring me, and I didn't have anybody to talk to or understand what was happening to me. I didn't realize that it was completely natural to be connected with spirit. So so yeah, so I shut it down for years.
That's really interesting. One of the things I'm sort of imagining listening is, you know, this kind of you talked about this holy water and sprinkling it around as out, imagining you going, oh my god, what have I done, what door have I opened? I I remember when I was in school. I don't remember how small I was, but I was very small, maybe 11 probably. And I had a school friend. So I grew up in the Caribbean, and we had all these reggae rhythms and soca rhythms, and really drum based kind of tribal sounding beats and things like that. And the reason why I mentioned that is because I had a friend who her mother told her that you mustn't listen to dance hall music. You mustn't listen to you can't go to crop over and carnival. You can't do these things because that's devil music. And the music, and this is something I heard when I was 11, and this is in the Caribbean, by the way. So can you imagine there was actually this kind of indoctrination
Yes.
that got people to want to reject what was completely natural.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a kind of theme I've got from listening. So can I ask, just when you going back a little bit to, you know, being aware of these beings around your cot or your bed when you were young, um, and do you remember when they actually disappeared? Do you have a recollection of the moment where you stopped seeing them, where you thought, "Where did my friends go?"
Um, Not really.
Yeah.
No, not really. I mean, my parents kind of like went through a split when I was about 5, 6 years old, and so I had a lot of trauma then to deal with, just kind of in the 3D world kind of thing. So I suppose that's where I forget. There's a big blank there from then, between then and when I was a teenager, I suppose. Um,
Yeah,
I,
that's helpful actually. Can I just ask one more thing before you go on? And so this is something I've heard a lot in the stories around people kind of becoming desensitized a little bit um, to something that's completely natural. When did you start to feel that and become aware of that again? Do you remember that when it started to reappear in your life? Because I mean, now it's very clear
mm,
that you are very much in tune with when why you say reawakening, because you've almost come full circle in a way, haven't you?
yes, very much so. Yes. Um, I mean, really, from the ages of about 18 onwards, when I moved, when I left home, really, um, I started to be reintroduced to spiritual teachings, Native American teachings, first and foremost. And it's funny how these things happen. I ended up going and watching Dances with Wolves. If you remember Dances with Wolves, I just think it was about 1990.
Yeah,
And
this was like one of the first times they made a film that was like 3 hours long or something, or
yeah,
it was an extraordinary long film. I certainly remember that.
yeah. But I went, I sat in that cinema, and I didn't want to leave at the end. I was so emotional. It felt like I'm getting emotional now, actually, just remembering it. I felt like I'd gone home. There was something about being immersed in that culture, that Native American Indian culture, and the sort of the beliefs and the spirituality of it, and the connection with the earth, and also their celebration of spirit. There is no separation between the physical and the spirit within Native American traditions, like a lot of indigenous tradition, teachings. And I just felt like I'd come home. I mean, I look back now and I can understand, and I recognize it as that was a really powerful past life connection, past life recall. But at the time, I was only like 19, 20, so I wasn't really consciously aware of what was going on. But I think that was my big reconnection point. It set something off in me. It got me so much into my heart. And sometimes it's almost like you have to break down the casing, the energetic casing that we've built up, through, from, again, our outside programming, through our education system, our religious, our society, how we've been brought up, friends, family influences, and we can all kind of like develop this shell around our heart, and we have to break it open for the light to get back in. um,
Yeah,
that's what I've learned, and that's why things like losing people, trauma, these can be the grief as transformation. It breaks open that kind of like these layers of illusion, um, and beliefs, limiting beliefs that we've kind of like surrounded ourselves in through our own circumstances. So that was a real heart opener for me. I came out just crying my eyes out, and then it felt completely bereft, because I
this is after the film.
yes, I felt so at home within the film, And then of course I felt completely disconnected again. So I kind of connected with my soul, or you know, through that heart center during the film. And then when I'd come out of the film, it's like that separation and disconnection again. I felt really bereft. But I started to look into and learn about Native American teachings, and really resonated with those. So I suppose that's when I kind of feel like I started to reconnect with the spiritual path.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, and it's quite powerful how it even illustrates that, you know, I know from the kind of storytelling world that, you know, when sometimes you see yourself in a story which triggers something in already present in you. You know, this is the power of even of myth,
Mm.
which we can identify ourselves in this story, and then we go, "Oh, so I'm kind of imagining you being transported into this world, and then realizing, hang on a minute, I've been here before," or you know, you had this unlocking moment. So, but you said that you didn't really know consciously what was really happening. So you had this really emotional experience, I'm gathering. What did that do for you? Did that take you down to a kind of a spiritual quest or questioning, or did you kind of just go off and lived your life normally? Hi, if you're enjoying this conversation, you might like SOAR Book Club. Many similar conversations are happening in SOAR Book Club, a book club for the spiritually curious. If you like spiritual books and community, then why not join SOAR, where we can grow together, learn together in a fun and nurturing environment. Click the link below in the description to find out more about SOAR Book Club, or to find out how you can join. It'd be nice to see you there.
I suppose I was lucky because I'd started to connect with other people that were on a kind of more spiritual level, and a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, so a lot of like an alternative community. So moving out of the family home, moving towns to a place that there was that kind of scene going on was crucial to me, really beginning to reconnect with who I was and feeling comfortable with who I was. For the first time, I suppose I felt like um, that I wasn't a black sheep. I wasn't the outsider. That, you know, there was other people like me in the world, and you know, it's so difficult to describe that to people that don't remember life before the internet, because it is so easy to connect with people like-minded now. Um, so um, so yeah, I started exploring the Native American traditions. I started going out, and I did a few like vision quests, you know, where you just go out and sort of I stayed on the hills overnight on my own, faced my fears of that, you know, of being alone at night. And I suppose it's just been a gradual unfolding since then. But I suppose it was 2015 that it's like everything just like completely opened up again. And what I find interesting now as a therapist that does soul coaching for clients is that I often ask them if they had a shift around 2016, 2017, because I noticed that so many people that are embodying now their sort of soul's mission, if you like, and stepped right onto their path as therapists, light workers, way showers. They have often had a big shift around 2016, sometimes 2018, especially people that weren't already doing what they were supposed to be doing. Something happened around that time to really kind of like shift everybody. It's almost like time's over for milling around on the platform. You've got to get on the train. And of course, looking back at what we've been through the last 2 years, that really started in sort of, you know, March 2020, to me that is so obvious about why that happened. It was almost like we were getting ready for what was coming down the track.
Yeah.
And my guides showed me images in 2019 of rows and rows and rows of Red Cross tents, you know, like the old army kind of field Red Cross tents. And they said to me, there's something coming that means that, you know, therapists, light workers, way showers, you've got to be ready, because there's going to be so many casualties coming off the battlefield and need healing. They'll need to know how to connect back with their souls. They, you know, I didn't know what was coming, but obviously with what we've gone through with the pandemic, that's obviously what they were showing me. But it's easy to take that as quite literal, as kind of like, you know, a virus making people ill and needing to go to hospital. But what they were showing me was energetically that people, it was going to be a huge awakening for people to be, you know, faced with who they are, what's life all about, is there anything after, you know, because what the pandemic has done, of course, is bring everybody face to face with their own mortality. And if you've not really thought about the wider universe and where you fit in with the wider universe, spiritually, then those are the people that I've seen that have really struggled over the last 2 years, because they've had nothing else to have a wider observational view of what's happening. So I find it fascinating how we have these shifts, and that often lots of us on the planet have shifts at the same time because of something that's coming down the line that we have no conscious awareness of until it actually happens.
Yeah, until you look in the rearview mirror and go, what just happened? Yeah. I was watching, where did I read? I read an article on a scientific journal the other day, saying that the planet, you know, as you get older, time perception is different from when you're younger, and you know everything seems to be happening so much faster. So this article kind of was like saying, you thought you were crazy when you said things were speeding up, but guess what? The planet is actually rotating 0.4 seconds faster, and it started to speed up in 2020, and it's the first time that it started to speed up in rotation since the 60s. And somebody made a comment and says, wow, even the planet wanted to get through 2020 faster.
Have you noticed that a 24-hour day now only feels like an 8-hour day, and what you used to be able to get done in a 24-hour day now just seems to be, there's just not enough time. Linear time is starting to fall apart. And yeah, I think that's a real, it's a real symptom of what we're going through in this kind of like ascension process, this sort of spiritual awakening, is that the old way of doing things, the old way of looking at things, especially that is very ego mind based, is just, it's not really going to be supported. And it's we really need to get more into flow and into present moment, rather than trying to control the future and look at things as a very 3D linear way, where we're becoming more multidimensional. And in reflection to that, time is feeling more multidimensional as well. So our perception of time, I think, is just going to get more and more strange until we kind of like break out of that illusion of time, that there is only really this now moment, and then another now moment, and another now moment.
And as soon as you say the word now, the now that you were talking about before is already gone.
Yeah.
So this is thank you for sharing that, and the richness of your perspective there as well. So I'm imagining you as this teenager who is almost being called to some kind of journey, and you encounter this film which hits you straight in your heart. You come out of this film emotionally open, but you're already in this environment which is nurturing of the questions you're asking, and so on and so forth. Were you already using language like ascension process back then, or multidimensional, kind of like some of the linguistic nuances that I'm hearing from you now. Did that
No.
start to come? Is that where is it? Was it 2015 where things really opened up for you personally as well? Then was there something big that happened then, or what was the bridge between Dances with Wolves and the Angela Latham who now sort of speaks with this level of awareness?
Mm. I think the big thing was 2015. I'd been working in the NHS for about 6 years as a GP receptionist, and so
Wow, I would let you were a GP receptionist.
yeah.
I would love for you to have been my GP receptionist. Why aren't they all like you?
Now that's
Seriously.
exactly the problem, you see. They have a really bad rep, and so that's perfect, because you can understand now that the level of negativity that that I was imbibing, really. um we're told what to do by the doctors, but the patients have the perception that we're the gatekeepers that are stopping them from seeing the doctor, that the doctor would like to see them, and we're kind of like doing that to the, but anyway, to cut a long story short, it was a very, very stressful job. And for somebody that was, highly empathic and highly sensitive, I really had no, I wasn't really consciously protecting myself energetically at the time. So I was just, it was just like I was getting all of this stuff thrown at me, and it was just going into my body, into my energetic field. I had no way of kind of protecting myself, and no way of, like, I didn't really understand energy hygiene. So just as we have a shower to wash off the dirt that we pick up in our everyday life on a physical level, we need to do that energetically as well. And I just wasn't doing that, and I didn't really know how to do it. So after 6 years, my stress levels were so high that my immune system completely collapsed, which is what happens, when you're in that sort of constant sympathetic nervous system. You've got, high levels of cortisol rushing through your body. Your blood pressure is high, your heart rate is high, and basically those states of adrenaline are only supposed to be for short periods of time, for getting through periods of danger, acute danger, stress. But then we're supposed to return back to that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and repair, rest and digest. And it's very obvious when we look at the African plains, and gazelles will be happily grazing, and then a lion will come along and they'll get the adrenaline rush and they'll run away, and if they're lucky enough to escape, they'll just like go, oh, nice grass, and back to grazing again. Where we'd be like, oh no, there might be another lion, any moment there might be another lion. Well, gazelles don't do that. They just they shake it off, and then they go back to the present moment where there's no lion, there's only lovely grass. So we really need to relearn how to do that. So, but of course, our society, many of us are just stuck in that that high adrenaline, high alert state. And basically what happens is that the body just starts to shut down anything that it doesn't need in that moment of needing to get away from the lion. So your immune system is your digestive system, your immune system, we don't need that when we're trying to run away from a lion. So basically that collapsed after 6 years of kind of like being scared of the lion. Wow. And I got diagnosed with ME and chronic fatigue. I was too ill to work. I was so in my head. I couldn't sleep at night, insomnia, anxiety. Basically, I was just living completely in my head, whereas I would say now that I live completely in my heart. And the difference is incredible. Yeah.
So you essentially burnt out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
can I just ask, were you, because I know by this time you already had some degree of awareness, and Dances with Wolves was way back in the past. Did you have practices or insights or anything that helped you at that time? And this just became kind of like another ripple of awakening, or did you kind of go back to sleep and have to reawaken again?
I would,
During the 6 year phase.
yeah, I would describe it as I still was had a spiritual path, but it was almost like something that I did as a hobby or at weekends, or it wasn't my full costume, everyday costume. So I wasn't fully engaged with it, I suppose. I suppose it's kind of like this was my normal life and this was my spiritual life, and they ran kind of like parallel, whereas like now they're one. So but I think we all have the warning signs, you know, spirit, your higher self, um, whatever you want to call it, is always tapping you on the shoulder, and it's always trying to get you to go left, go left, go left. But you know, our ego minds and our free will as humans are kind of like, now I'm going right. So so I had I had these kind of niggles of kind of like, you shouldn't be in this job, you know, it's not right for you, it's not good for you, you should be doing something that brings you more joy, your art, your photography. um and I suppose you just ignore it because the ego mind says it's a good job, it's pension, you know, and the fear programs of what, you know, well, how am I going to make any money from doing what you love? um you know, so all of these limiting beliefs that I had were stopping me really from doing what I should be doing.
Mm.
And sooner or later, spirit will slap you down if you don't listen. So sometimes that is, you know, your marriage falling apart, sometimes you get the sack, sometimes yeah, whatever.
Hey man, have you been reading my biography?
And that's, you know, I love the saying, drama is what we create to get our attention when we're not paying attention. And I think it's perfect, because whether it's a cancer diagnosis or a marriage falling apart or a job loss, you know, we can all look back. I think if we're totally honest, we can all look back and know that we were getting those intuitive hits and those feelings of, this isn't right, I should be moving forward, I should, and we ignore it, partly because sometimes we don't believe that we're worthy enough, sometimes we don't believe that it's possible, and other times it is just literally how we've been programmed by society, and we just continually override that intuitive heart hit with our analytical ego mind. So we allow the ego mind to run the show. And I'm not saying the ego mind isn't valuable, but we have to go through the heart center first. We have to get that intuitive hit first to then be able to use the mind in the correct way rather than against us.
So just let me just share something very quickly with you, right? You mentioned this, not listening or paying attention. Actually, I remember I had a car accident some years ago. I was in a corporate job, and I knew for 2 years I should have left, but I wouldn't leave, because, I've got responsibilities. I'm a father, I've got bills to pay, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And one winter's morning, I was driving down the M25, icy morning as well, and my car spun out of control. It was a BMW, so it had rear wheel drive, which is terrible on ice. And I took a detour that morning. I remember it so vividly because I thought, oh, I was actually going to the airport to pick up my father from Gatwick. And I remember taking this detour through this really leafy Surrey village. It was maybe 6 a.m., but it was winter, so it was still dark outside. And it was just a lovely morning. I had my coffee cup with me. I was enjoying the empty streets, the real silence of the village. It was a leafy part of town. Came back onto the M25, and I'm just thinking about what I'm going to do when I get to the airport. And when I got on the M25, I'm driving. There's a few cars around, but it's not too dense, you know, when it's like spaced out. And the front wheel hit this ice water patch and slid an aquaplane sort of at the same time. And I just felt straight away that I had lost control of the car. The car spun across 3 lanes, missed every single car. Okay, not a single car was hit. As I spun around the middle lane, I actually saw oncoming traffic because the car spun around. And this car was heading towards me, spun across the slow lane into this hard barrier on the side. Front still spinning, side and back. All the lights at the front, side, and back were bashed out. The side airbag was deployed. All the airbags were deployed. And then it bounced back into the road, into the center lane at 90 degrees oncoming traffic. Black car, sleet and snow, 6 a.m. I saw this car coming straight towards me in my periphery. So I just grabbed my phone and ran across the lanes. A guy in a lorry saw me. He put his hazards on and kind of like made sure he slowed down quickly. I ran across. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because what you're saying so resonates. And then when the ambulance came, because some people witnessed the crash, they came over, they were like, "Oh my God, are you okay? I'm a first aider, let me check you." When the ambulance came, they were looking in the car for bodies with a flashlight. And they were like, "Where, who was in this car?" And I said, "It was me." And he says, "You were in this car?" And I said, "Yeah." The paramedics came when they said that. They went, "Come with me." And they put me in the back of their ambulance. And I tell you, Angie, all I left with was a sore elbow, probably maybe a bang on the head, like from the impact. But what I'm saying is like nothing, almost without a scratch.
Mm.
And when I walked away, I took that as you are not walking on the path you should be walking on. And this was a huge wake up moment. Would you believe I resigned from my job that very week?
I would believe it, and it's like, good on you, because some people wouldn't have. I mean that's a real big slap wake up call, isn't it? I mean, it's just like, it doesn't get much kind of like in your face than that.
Yeah, I got slapped with a car.
Yeah. So so 2020 February 2021, I had a near head-on crash. I was going through a real kind of like, I know what's happening with the planet, but I don't know whether I want to be here. And it's like, I don't think I've got the strength to be here for this time. So I was having this real kind of, would I be of better service outside of the physical body, I suppose, of transitioning back to spirit? And I had pretty much exactly the same as you. I was kind of I just nearly had this head-on crash. We kind of swerved each other, but we kind of clipped on the side, and I just walked away with it without a scratch. When I went to grab my my bag with my phone in it to get out of the car, there was a little angel card on the passenger seat, face down, and I've never had any angel cards in that car. I do have them at my therapy room. They stay in a bowl at my therapy room, but I've never had them in my car. And there was nothing on that seat when I got in the car, and it was basically I'd completely lost my faith. Lost my faith in my intuition and what I was doing here, and when I picked up that, I still keep it here. When I picked up that angel card, this is what it was.
Faith. Wow.
Faith. Yeah. So that just like permanently lives now as a reminder on my little altar. So yeah, it's a real angelic bitch slap, I called it. And it reminded me that, we can just go just like that. It's easy to leave the physical body. It's easy to leave this life.
Yeah.
And if, no matter how dreadful or lost we feel, if we're still here, we're meant to be still here. So get curious about why we're
Why?
here.
Yeah.
Why are we still here? What is it that we're supposed to be doing or learning or growing from? Because one thing that I believe 110% is that when the soul is ready for us to exit, we'll exit, and we have, I also believe that we have several kind of exit doors, if you like, along the way, that sometimes we set up. Some of them we set up before incarnation, and some of them we kind of like create as we go. But there's definitely several places where we can kind of take a
Where you
stop.
can alight. They're like train stations or bus
Yeah,
stops.
yeah. Do you
Yeah.
want to get off now, or do you want to carry on a little bit longer? Yeah, and I've definitely had, 2 or 3 of those in my life where,
Wow.
and that was definitely one of them.
Was
But
that
that
that was actually so that was a year ago,
was February 21. Yeah,
or
yeah,
just over a year. So going back and to when you burnt out after 6 years in your corporate role, that was and you've kind of quit in, was it 2015, I think you said, or
yeah.
around then. That intervening period must have been quite a big period of transformation for you. What did that evolution look like for you? Because that is pretty huge. I mean, I guess of course it involved a lot of healing physically and so on too. But what happened? And then I guess part two to that question is, what made you fall out of faith again in 2021?
Yeah. Well, I think I think the thing with awakening is that it is just a gradual unfolding. So
Mhm.
you get to a certain point, and then there's another ceiling that has to open. And what I've found is, before you get to that great expansion, there's often like a real contraction. So often we'll get these kind of like these real challenges, or kind of loss of faith or questioning, and we really kind of contract, almost like a snake that is kind of got too big for its skin, and it's kind of like, I can't fit, and then we'll expand again. That's been my experience and my observation when I look back on my life, that it's just shedding of another skin, and you come out sort of like brighter, and more colorful for it. But at the time it feels so you know it can feel so debilitating and so dark, really. But I think it's all partly a little more death of the ego, and a little more death of the ego, so that in 2015, like 2021, really it's a let go and let God moment, isn't it? It's kind of like where you get to the point where the ego, for whatever reason, the ego mind has got a bit more too in charge than it should be, and it takes that kind of bringing you back to a place of surrender, where you just give it over back, almost, to your soul or higher self or angels, or whatever you identify with. And it's just that letting go of control, letting go of the wheel, and allowing things to start happening, and your soul comes in and takes over. That's how I see it. So in 2015, I literally woke up, at 3 a.m. I woke myself up crying because I could not face going into work the next morning. And my husband said, "You can't go in. You need to go to the doctor and get signed off for stress." So I did. And so I had 2 weeks, and then that turned into 4 weeks, and that turned into a month. And I just never went back to that job. But it took getting to that point where I could not drive the wheel of that car anymore before that the light got in and that expansion was allowed to happen. So for ME and chronic fatigue, there's no conventional cure. They don't really know how to treat it in allopathic medicine. So I looked for alternatives. Started going, I went to a gong bath in 2016, and that really, has changed my life, because if I hadn't have gone to that gong bath, then I wouldn't be sat here, talking to you now. I wouldn't be a sound therapist. I wouldn't have learnt to use sound and vibration. And it's not only changed my health and my energetic health, but it's also completely changed my spiritual views, in that it's sound and vibration, frequency, it's filled in all the gaps that were missing. It's kind of like, how do we connect to spirit? How does the universe work? It's all about vibration and frequency. It's all about energy. So learning about vibration and frequency has it's given me all the answers that I didn't have any answers to, even though I was always on that spiritual path. So what I found when I went to my first gong bath was I just journeyed for the first time in years. I kind of journeyed like I was on, psychedelic drugs or something. I went completely out of myself, and saw myself on a hilltop as a Native American woman. So that was, harking back really to that first awakening. But I was an elder, and I was drumming, and I connected to bear medicine, and the bear just came and sort of like put its arms around me and hugged me, and we kind of like went into this sort of dance where we became each other. And it was just, just an amazing sort of vibrational trip, really. But I kind of came out of that gong bath feeling completely clear, completely energized. I'd gone in feeling exhausted, with my chronic fatigue. And the worst thing that I found about the chronic fatigue was the constant brain fog. It was like having a permanent hangover. But coming out of the gong bath, not only did I feel crystal clear, but I also felt re-energized as well. So it worked on all levels. It worked on my physical level, my emotional level, the mental level. The monkey mind just shut the up, all of that overthinking and all of the sort of constant mind loops that I'd been suffering from, negative mind loops that I couldn't get out of, that just kind of dissipated. And I suppose really what it did is it got me back into my heart center. And once you're in your heart center, then you're in present moment awareness, but it opens you out to the multidimensionality of who you are as a soul. And all of a sudden, what's not important falls away, and what is important is kind of like, it's almost like you get in touch with that inner knowledge and that inner wisdom that's always been there. So it was a pretty powerful experience for me going to my first gong bath. So that really set me on the journey to becoming a sound therapist myself. I started to go along every 2 weeks to this gong bath, and then was like, oh, but I need something in between. So I bought myself my own gong, and so that I could just play it at home and meditate at home. And the rest is history, really. Now that is my full-time job now, is doing sound baths and sound-based meditations.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I want to get the name of the sound therapist or sound healer who did that initial sound therapy for you, because you said that if you hadn't been there, then you wouldn't be here talking to me, which means I would never have met you. So I need to send them a card.
Actually, we actually work together now. So we do
awesome.
we do joint gong baths once a month. He plays his gongs and I do the crystal bowls and the Tibetan bowls. So we kind of collaborate together once a month, and we're always sold out. Actually, it's a beautiful venue that we do these sound baths in, but they're always sold out. We always have a waiting list. So yeah.
Sound seems to be playing such an important role at this period of time. I mean, you would be the third sound person, either healer, therapist, or somebody working with sound on this series.
Mm.
And it just seems to be really an important part, actually, of supporting people at this time, I would imagine. Because for me to have three, and it's not because I was seeking out sound, you know, I just, whoever comes to the show, I just believe they have something valuable to say and add. Um, well, one thing I'm interested in before you go, if you have like a few more minutes, is this last phase. Because, you know, you woke up to a different version of yourself and you really went into presence and connected with your heart space and got back on the path that you felt you should be walking on. So what happened to put things a little bit askew in the last few years to maybe bring you this message of falling out of faith? Is there anything you want to share around that?
Yeah, it was well, the pandemic. So I'd been a very sensible person, and I'd built up my sound therapy business quietly on the side of. I did go back into it. So at the end of 2015, I went back very part time into the NHS, but not in a front role job. I was admin at the back, so no patient contact. So that kind of like was paying our rent.
Which is actually ironic because you're the ideal person to be speaking to patients at the front who really, do you know what I mean? It's so funny, like the people who really need your energy are the people who want to kill you.
Of course, yes. Of course, part of me loved that job because I do want to be of service. That's really all of our calling, is to be of service. And it's just finding out how we be of service to others while also bringing ourselves joy. So being of service to others in a GP surgery, it was being of service to others, but it wasn't really bringing me joy because of, it wasn't my alignment. Some people are very good at that job and I admire them, but for me, I'm a sensitive, I'm a healer. I need to be of service in another way. So but anyway, I did go back in an admin role, but only very part-time. It literally just it was just covering our rent. So by 2019, October 2019, my guides were really, really adamant that now was the time to let go of the NHS job and go full-time self-employed. And they were very specific. They did not want me still in the NHS on the 1st of January 2020. Which again, looking back, it's just like, wow, So I gave my notice in October. I needed to give 2 months notice, which took you up to December. So January the 1st, 2020, I was fully self-employed, really looking forward to being my own boss and doing what I absolutely love. And just like I had almost a year's work already booked, for retreats and workshops and sound baths and all these sort of things. So I was doing really well for the first 3 months of 2020. And then of course the pandemic hit and, everything disappeared. I mean, it's kind of like my diary cleared. So I had, no income, no way of earning money, because I'd only just become self-employed. Of course, I fell through the net from help from the government. So it was almost like every single door got quite literally slammed in my face. And of course, my husband was lucky enough to be on furlough, but 80% of a not great wage is not enough. But we still had more money than we'd get on universal credit. So again, no help there. So that was really, really tough. And of course it, it made me question everything. It's kind of like, why on earth, I was following my intuition, and I was, following my heart and what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's like, now what, and it was really kind of like, oh my God, I've just misread everything. It was all my imagination. There's no guides, there's no higher self, there's no intuition. It's just like I've just been really stupid and let go of a good job, which would have been perfectly safe during the pandemic, being in the NHS. And now we are faced with complete ruin, not being able to pay our rent. We're going to end up on the streets. Oh God, so I remember sort of when we were still very much in lockdown and we weren't supposed to go out anywhere except to get food or medicines. I just got in the car because I had cabin fever, and I just drove out to the middle of the countryside, found somewhere to park up where I didn't think I was going to get harassed by the police, and I just screamed the place down, first of all, in my car. And then after the screaming and the shouting and the anger and the bitterness, I then completely broke down and cried. And then when I totally exhausted that emotion, again, that's where you got to that kind of let go and let God kind of, the ego let go. And my guides came in very quickly and very strongly, almost kind of like saying, now you've stopped having a tantrum, we're going to talk to you. Oh, wow. So, and they said, basically in a nutshell, they said, how the universe works, how the quantum field works, how law of attraction works, that you can co-create your own reality, all this. Now you've got to put it into practice. This isn't something that you can keep teaching others. You're going to have to live it. It's like, you've got no income, you've got no help money wise, then co-create it, so it was basically, oh my God, I've really got to put literally my money where my mouth is, and I've got to start trusting and surrendering that money will come in and I'll be okay. And that's what I had to do through 2020, was completely be very careful where I was vibrating, what my mind was doing, the thoughts I was having. So every time I'd get into that fear, the fear loops of kind of like, oh, we're not going to get any money, we're going to end up on the street, all that sort of thing, I'd kind of rein it back in and go back into the heart center and just get in touch with the frequency of what it feels like to be abundant, what it feels like to have money coming in, without the ego mind getting in the way, going, well, where's that going to come from? It can't, because that's, because you don't qualify for this, or what, or that's impossible. So leaving all of those kind of like that ego mind limiting belief stories behind, and just keeping in that heart center of, no, I know what the vibration and the frequency of abundance feels like. I'm going to keep bringing myself back to that vibration and that frequency, just like in an old-fashioned radio station. You just keep tuning into that, the radio station that you want. And if you start going off the dial, then you start getting the interference, you start getting the you have to keep putting that dial back. And that's
now you're showing your age, because everybody uses DAB now.
I know. But cassettes are the in thing, apparently.
They're making a comeback, are they?
Yeah.
I've still got some VHSs that I need to go down.
Everything comes back in a cycle, doesn't it? Yeah. So yeah, it really taught me to live like that. And I suppose what happened in 2021, you got through 2020, but then we had that other lockdown again at Christmas, and then that actually, I think that ended up being a longer lockdown, didn't it, in the end, than the first one. And that's, I really struggled in that January, February period of 2021. Again, I just felt like I was just getting back on my feet. I'd done the co-creating, and then it was sort of like almost like snakes and ladders back down to the bottom again. Yeah. So, and because it was winter and it's dark and it's dingy, and you're spending a lot of time indoors, so you're not getting out. Well, I wasn't anyway, getting outside in nature and stuff. So I suppose I started getting back into those mind loops, that sort of like more operating from the ego mind and the lack, limitation and competition rather than staying in the heart center. But also I felt like, 2020, that was hard work, energetically it was hard work. And I felt like, I don't want to do this again in 2021. And that's when I started having do I really want to do this? And, I was hearing other things about, the pandemic is just the start. There's other things coming down the line. This is part of a sort of 4 or 5 year arc of, the old paradigms and the old systems breaking down. And I suppose it was dawning on me that this wasn't a sprint, it was actually going to be a marathon. And I was kind of like, oh, do you know what? Have I got the energy? I just don't know whether I've got the energy to do it. So those were the kind of thoughts that were going through my head. And I started to doubt myself on a human level. I know who I am at a soul level now, but it's kind of like I'm very aware that I'm in a human body with a certain type of brain that is programmed in a certain type of way. And it's kind of sometimes they just aren't compatible. Human personality, Angela Latham, is not compatible with the soul. So I was having this real tug of war about, it wasn't a kind of a fearful thing. It was just a kind of, do I really want to stay here in a physical body through this time of transition? Or do I want to exit now, get off the train and do what I can from up there rather than down in the battlefield, if you like. So I wasn't sure. What I was supposed to do. So that bitch slap of a car crash was kind of my answer, really. And since then I've been like, okay, I'm obviously supposed to be here because you'd have taken me out. So I'll just get on with sort of being here. And it was a kind of like a get your big girl's pants on and just just carry on sort of thing. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm
Wow.
more in flow, more interest and surrender than I ever have been in my life. And the more I trust and surrender, the better life is. Still have challenges, of course. It doesn't mean that you don't have challenges. It doesn't mean that you don't lose people. It doesn't mean that sort of like, tragedy or drama doesn't happen. But it's the way you start to react to it and the way that you're able to react to things in a more spiritually aligned way and a more non-judgmental way, I suppose. And that again is largely through my understanding of frequency and vibration, that basically everything is in the physical world, on planet Earth anyway, is an exploration of frequency. So if you have fear on the one end of the scale and love on the other end of the scale, we have a million shades of grey in between, and each one is just a different radio band. It's just a different frequency, and it's kind of like and we have the power as souls to co-create our reality, to explore these different bands of frequency. And if you're in a band of frequency that you don't enjoy, then we have got the power to change that frequency if we want to. But we do have the free will. We can be the pity party and complain about what we don't have, or we can be grateful and look for the gifts in what we do have. And I suppose seeing things in the form of frequency allows me to be non-judgmental. So it's kind of like, if I go into fear, or if my ego gets a bit too active, then I can observe that in a non-judgmental way and think, oh, that's a fear program that's come from when I was 7, from when I wasn't picked for the team at school, or or that's when I was laughed at as a teenager for speaking my truth, and or whatever it is. But I see it as a vibrational frequency. That's interesting frequency. That's judgment and persecution. That seems to come up quite a lot in my life. So that is obviously something that me as a soul is trying to work through. Is letting go of that perception of judgment and persecution. And I've noticed that personally, that is a theme that I've struggled with through my life, and many of my clients do as well. And of course, it takes the form of not speaking our truth a lot of the time. And when I trained as a past life regression therapist, I realized that some of these things, are not just from this life, but they can be carried on from other experiences in other lives and other dimensions as well. So if I was burnt at a stake as a witch, for going against the narrative of the time, then, when I'm speaking up about the narrative of this time, be it coronavirus or vaccine passports or whatever it is, then that can trigger the same kind of, just like a tuning fork. You can strike that here and it will vibrate through the energy field of where I've come across that as a challenge before. So it'll amplify it. So sometimes we come across challenges or situations where we seem to have, we seem to, what's the word I want? We seem to kind of, you'll have to write this out. An over amplification of emotion, if you like, that something will make us emotionally react disproportionate to what's actually happened. And that is because it's triggering somewhere else in our energetic field where we've come across it before, where we haven't faced it, or we haven't healed it, and we've just suppressed it. We haven't integrated that lesson or challenge or knowledge.
Wow, this is quite relevant, actually. So I'm thinking about all of the people who are listening to this, who probably, on their own journeys, and, seeing how 2020 has been significant for them on their own path. And really just, I also think it's really nice that, there are people like you who are teaching and serving and helping people to heal. We're also showing that, we're still all on a journey of learning too. And I think that's one of the big things about this show. Like, everybody who's come on the show said, hey, I'm not awakened, I'm awakening. And it's the active on the ing part, which really is where I get a lot of the value from personally. This is really pleasure for me to hear and learn from people like you. So I want to, first of all, thank you for all that you're doing in the world. Thank you for coming on and talking to me and making the time. Thank you for taking that first sound bath back in 2016. Because we wouldn't have met, I haven't forgotten that. But hopefully we could maybe have another conversation down the line, as well as things unfold, if you'd like to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not sure whether I've answered any of your original questions, but I did warn you that I would go off on tangent. And
I think you've covered quite nicely some of the experiences that you've had. And this is the other hard thing about when people are sharing their stories. Everybody's life's got millions of stories, right? So it's kind of like, okay, what's pertinent, what's relevant to this, and how best can I illustrate this point? And I think you were fantastic in helping me to understand some of the things that got you where you are. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm really really happy that you've had me on, because I kind of requested you really via Alex. I saw your interview with Alex and said, I just really love Calvin's energy. Do you think you'd like to talk to me? So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So this was all set up by you, orchestrated by you. Excellent.
Wow. Well, and you and Alex, because if you hadn't have interviewed Alex, then I wouldn't have come across you probably. So nothing's a coincidence, is it? And that's what I love, is that we all really do interweave and co-create our realities. And if we do speak again, maybe we can talk about that, our incarnations, the soul contracts, the energies that we weave between souls, soul family, because that's a huge part of my work as well, that kind of feeds into the sound of vibration. But it's kind of like the sound therapy was a springboard onto that. So yeah. And I'm finding that in my therapy sessions that I am very multidimensional in how client sessions go. So I don't box myself into they're coming for sound therapy or they're coming for hypnotherapy, and it's just it just organically grows to whatever they are, what they need at the time, and so yeah, this is an exciting time to be alive. It's really exciting, and it's very much like a roller coaster, isn't it? It's thrilling, and but also completely scary at the same time. But at a soul level, it's what we love. We absolutely love this roller coaster ride, even if our human counterparts are like, oh my god, it's too scary, I can't do this. And you're absolutely right, we learn. Everybody is a teacher and a student, and there is no enlightenment. We wouldn't be incarnating into a physical body if we were that enlightened. We'd just be back at source. So I suppose that the message that I would like to leave with anybody is, whatever path you're following, and however you see spirit, source, God, always feel in your heart center what resonates with you, and then discard the rest, because what anybody else has said or written is just their perception and their take on things, and none of us know the truth from outside of us, but we know the truth inside of us. So it's more about getting to know how we tune into that truth inside of us. Other people outside of us can only guide us, but
Wow. Yeah.
only we have our own answers, and I hope that that's what I help people do, is empower them to understand that we all have our own answers, and it's whatever resonates with us through love, obviously. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, a wonderful actual summation is, the way out is the way in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What is most meaningful for you in 2022? Is it healing and forgiveness? Is it love and belonging? Or maybe it's the courage to be and to act. Soar Book Club has all of this for you. If you want to read more and need accountability to keep you moving forward in your already busy life, are you looking for inspiration to develop your spiritual awareness? Maybe you want to be part of a positive community during these uncertain times, or connect with like-minded people who love stories and books. Then join Soar Book Club. Hop on board. The train is about to leave the station, and I would love to have you on the journey with me. So click the link below to join. That's Soar Book Club with me, Calvin Niles. I hope to see you there.